Hey everybody, welcome back to the third lesson in the Stylized Game Weapons class. In this third lesson, we're going to be going over sculpting the secondary forms in ZBrush. By secondary forms, I mean things such as large bevels, but not quite the dings or the big cracks or anything like that. So, before we can even do that, in ZBrush, we need to make sure that this base mesh is ready to be sculpted on. So, I'm going to start right up here with this top piece. But if I go ahead and just divide this, you'll notice that the original form kind of gets destroyed. There's a couple things we can do. You could go ahead and use Dynamesh at a certain level. But what I prefer to do for certain things like this, I'm just going to go ahead and take smooth off. Divide this 7 times, put smooth back on, delete lower. And at this point, we should have plenty of resolution to work with. And the edges are very, very well maintained. So that should be good for what we need. Do the same thing on this piece. Same thing down here. And then we're going to run into a little bit of an issue here in the cylinder. So when I try to do what I just did, divide a couple times, hit smooth, and divide again, you'll notice that a lot of the facets or a lot of the edges that we don't want are still there. And sure, we could with like trim dynamic and pinch brush and various things and smoothing, we could take care of that, but that'll take a little bit of time, and it'll be hard to get the exact form that we're kind of intending it to look like. And if we try to just smooth at level 1, or divide with smooth on at level 1, you'll notice that the general form gets kind of compromised. So for instances like this, it will actually be faster and cleaner to basically divide this in Maya by utilizing supporting edge loops. So I'm going to go back into Maya. I'm going to actually go ahead and turn off the transparency of this model. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some supporting edge loops in. Mesh tools, insert edge loop tool. Oh, I don't want multiple edge loops on, just an equal distance. Put that and put that. Then what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick check. I'm going to hit 3 on the keyboard, and that will pull up the smooth mesh preview. And now when I look at the mesh, you'll see that that's an edge, at least for what my intentions are for this model. That is an edge that I really want. So I went back on the keyboard, and I'm going to go ahead and start doing supporting edge loops elsewhere. Now the general philosophy for these supporting edge loops, and for basically hard surface modeling, is that you always definitely want these 2 supporting edges on any edge that you want to maintain, and that the distance between the main edge and the supporting edge will determine how sharp that edge will be. I'm going to go back to Mesh Tools, and now I'm going to do Offset Edge Loop Tool from here. That should give us what we need. Same thing here. Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop Tool. Alrighty, that is exactly what we need to be. But now, I also personally prefer to go ahead and divide this in Maya with the supporting edge loops. So I'm going to hit 1 on the keyboard again. And either I can press this icon up here, or I can go to Mesh, Smooth. And now this is perfect for us to export as an OBJ into ZBrush and start sculpting on. So I can repeat the same process for all these shapes on here. One thing to note is that because there's this huge stretch right here, without any other edge loops in here, we are going to want to do something like Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop Tool, with like 4 additional edges. That will prevent even an edge loop that's very close to the edge up here from really stretching down too far. So that is all we need to do for smoothing the mesh and getting it ready to be sculpted on in Maya, in ZBrush. And so now, just to kind of show how this works, I'm going to pull this up. And for here, you see I can divide this a couple times to smooth on, and it looks perfect. That is exactly the kind of resolution and edges we need. So I'm going to repeat that process and make this sculpt totally ready for us to sculpt on. Alrighty, so that's all set. So now we can start sculpting the secondary forms, those large bevels, on this main stone piece. Now, one thing to point out is that we can actually go ahead and do this in Maya. So we can do some pretty elaborate sort of cuts in here. We can sort of scale in that main cut right here. Then we can put in the supporting edge loops. And we can definitely get what we need in Maya for these secondary forms, or we can sculpt it. So today I'm going to show you a sculpting technique for doing this, but just to kind of show you a quick way, at least intro how you would do this in Maya, I'm going to quickly show you that as well. So, for instance, for this bevel right here, I need to make sure I get that off again. One edge loop in for the middle of the bevel, outer, outer. And now I'm going to go ahead and take this edge in the middle. I'm going to go ahead and scale it in. Out there. Go back to the insert edge loop tool. Start putting these edges. Again, the rule is to always have two supporting edges for the main edge. And now I don't have supporting edges elsewhere, but when I hit 3, you'll notice that this bevel right here is very well maintained. So if you prefer to do that technique, go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and show you something in ZBrush to do bevels such as those. So now that we're in ZBrush, there's actually one additional thing I want to show you guys really quickly, and that is setting up an image plane in ZBrush. It is pretty nice while you're working in ZBrush if you have to hit a certain concept to go ahead and have that concept as like a background. I don't necessarily always do this, but it's good to do every once in a while, or at least know how to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and load image. I'm going to find the image plane. So actually, the first thing you'll notice is that it's way too large. So if I go back here, change the image size to about half, about 50. JPEG image plane. We now have something perfect. And now, what I can also do to make the actual sculpt opacity a little lower, I can hit reference views and change the model opacity to something like 75. And now where something like this can come in handy is if you ever need to be fairly precise. And so I'm going to kind of show you how an image like this can be pretty handy. Do line this up a decent amount. And then I'm going to go ahead and do zoom right here and scroll here. Zoom it in a decent amount. And I'm going to actually go ahead and start masking in where I'm going to want this large bevel to be. And also, actually, I'm going to divide this at least one more time. Yeah, just one more time. Just want to make sure I have enough resolution in this mask. So I'm going to block out where I want this to exist, this bevel. Now that that's blocked out, I can go back to actual. I can also go ahead and turn off, put opacity back on all the way. And this is like somewhat accurate, but it's not exactly how I want it to be. So I'm going to go in and start tweaking some of it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make this more precise with the mask curve. So I'm going to go ahead and make this mask a little bit larger at first. Make it precise with the curve. I'll show you that in a second. So I'm going to hit this, go to mask curve. Now what I can do is when I'm holding Control and then Shift, whoops, I chose the wrong one though. It's not mask curve, it's just mask curve. Now when I hit Control, then Shift, when I hit Shift, I am able to constrain the angles in 5-degree increments. And when I hit the space bar, I can move that mask. So I don't want it to be quite that sharp, maybe like 30. You kind of place it where you want it to be, about there. Do the same thing here. Just find the size that you want, about there. Oh, do about 40 works. Here we go. All right, so that basically works for us. And what I do is I go ahead and take the pinch tool. And in case you didn't notice, there are some pretty neat shortcuts for reaching different brushes instead of having to always kind of click up here. So for instance, get to your standard brush, you hit B, then S, then T. For getting to your pinch brush, you hit V, then P, then I. And I know I'm going to want the intensity to be a little bit more, maybe even at like 40. I'll try 40. And with lazy mouse on, I'm going to go ahead and start doing an invert pinch. So with Alt selected, I'm going to start to. Actually, I do want to make sure that the size is fairly large to basically encompass the entire mask. And then once I've laid that in, I'm going to hit 1 a bunch of times. So what 1 does in ZBrush is it repeats the last action. And what this is going to do is it's going to give us this bevel right here. So maybe went a little too extreme. But what I can do is once I've kind of beveled that in, I can then kind of just go ahead with the move tool a little bit and move it into place. This will basically give you the sharp bevel you need, and because you've pinched it so many times, what we can actually do is just, with the smooth brush, smooth some stuff out. And what we're going to do, because, I mean, using the pinch brush a lot of times can be pretty bad for mesh, but if you dynamesh afterwards, you will be able to maintain the form you want while fixing the mesh. So I'm going to do this again, right over here. Another trick is if you hold down Shift as you start to move along the surface, you'll be able to do it in 90-degree or 45-degree increments, or angles, I mean. So same thing, hitting 1 bunch of times. Let's just smooth that out a little bit. A little too much there. Too much. And so basically, I can use things like the move tool, smoothing, to kind of get where I want it to be. But you don't have to worry about too much right here. So you basically do that, and then you're going to dynamesh this at the highest setting. Go to dynamesh, highest setting. And then at this point, you also start to kind of smooth this out, fix some of these edges. And when you're doing this, you might want to be a little more careful. Just kind of going through this to kind of show you the motion so you'll know how to do it. Another thing you do is get the brush trim dynamic up to also help get some of these edges how you want it to be. And basically, once you've gotten this where you want it to be, another thing I like to do at the end for a lot of these cuts right here, just to make it a little more interesting, I like using the Damien Standard brush. So that's BDS, Damien Standard. And it sort of acts as like a standard brush with a little bit of pinch added to it, as far as I believe. So I'm going to go ahead and right in here, just to kind of show you how this works. I'm going to lay that in, press 1 a couple times. And again, I'm going to go ahead and dynamesh this again. Smooth some of the oddities out. But basically, you just kind of keep working back and forth, using these brushes. Dynamesh whenever you feel like you need a Dynamesh. And you'll eventually get this to where you need to be. Now, to show you how I would do this bevel down here in a really quick way, I can go ahead and do the mask rectangle, invert it, make sure I place it about right, which actually that is good, and then I do the same thing. This time I can hold down the shift key as I'm doing this, press 1 which times, and then you see how you basically get the bevels that you need really, really quickly. Dynamesh. Start smoothing it out. And you can even, before you even Dynamesh that, it might be a little easier if you use a smooth brush first before you Dynamesh it. That'll generally get you what you need, just to kind of show you what this will look like when you kind of, if you go about it maybe in a little slower and more precise manner. You can easily get something that will look like this. And it's really, really honestly not that hard to do. You gotta be a little careful at times, but I personally find it a pretty nice way of getting some hard surface bevels in. So I would definitely recommend at least trying it out and seeing if it works out for you. But yeah, so that will do it for this part. The next part, we're going to go ahead and show you how to do some of these bevels for maybe the glyph part, this other stone clasp, and we will also go ahead and move, scale, and rotate this base mesh stone into all these other sections. So those are ready to then start sculpting all the details in. So stay tuned to the next lesson.